During the late 19th and early 20th century, the emergence of psychology as an independent discipline, separate from philosophy on the one hand and neurology on the other, led to investigations of human behavior that gradually revealed the need for more subtle methods of analysis than those provided by the physical and biological sciences. Freud's investigations into the human psyche suggested the power of irrational motivations and unconscious drives. Weber's studies on human authority and Pavlov's studies on psychological stimuli and his creation of Pavlovian conditioning also contributed greatly as psychological studies. A new relativism in values and the loss of confidence in objectivity of knowledge led to modernism in intellectual and cultural life. Freudian psychology provided a new account of human nature that emphasized the role of the irrational and the struggle between the conscious and subconscious. Sociology developed during the late 19th century as a way to study the social lives of people, groups, and societies to better understand how society works best. Sociology is the study of our behavior as social beings, covering everything from the analysis of short contacts between anonymous individuals on the street to the study of global social processes. In the later half of the 19th century and early 20th century, Sigmund Freud had developed many theories and studies regarding the topic of human psychology. Freud revealed the unconscious and instinctual nature of human behavior in his studies. He went against Enlightenment philosophies, which had glorified human reason and the abilities of man to act rationally. To Freud, the human psyche was not very rational, and it was largely influenced by unconscious forces. Freud had argued that the human psyche is far from rational and is influenced by dreams as an unconscious force. He stated that the human mind has multiple levels of conscience, and that dreams reveal an underlying or hidden part of the personality, the subconscious, where many desires and unpleasant memories are buried. Freud described dreams as windows to inner conflicts and irrational desires of an individual, and by drawing out the hidden meaning of dreams, the person would be capable of seeing the roots of their psychological problems. Freud created psychoanalysis with the goal of drawing out these underlying memories and conflicts which caused their mental illness. In his psychoanalytic theory, Freud stated that the human psyche was comprised of three parts: ego, the part which is most in touch with external reality and reasoning; id, the part containing instinctive drives and sexual energies, which regards to the pleasure principle; and superego, which is the conscience of the human. These three parts combated with one another for control of an individual's personality, and the unresolved conflicts that developed from these parts created neuroses. Freud believed that sexual feelings begin to occur early in life, as people repress many of these desires to remain civilized and be mature. He had stated that children develop through a series of stages, each marked by conflicts such as the Oedipal or Electra complex, depending on gender. These complexes were hidden desires to replace the parent of the same sex in the eyes of the parent of the opposite sex. Freud had also stated that the adult gender identity develops over the course of a person's life experiences. This helps to fulfill certain aspects of gender roles, such as motherhood. As for women's sexual feelings, Freud theorized that girls and women have powerful sexual feelings. However, Freud ignored girls' complaints about sexual misconduct or abuse, instead attributing it to a fantasy caused by quote-unquote penis envy, which led to many social workers believing that many cases of this abuse did not happen, and this led to Freud being viewed poorly by many women in the future, as his theories were viewed with negativity amongst them. Freud had stated that the ego uses many defense mechanisms at an unconscious level. These mechanisms assist in warding off feelings such as anxiety or depression, and making good things feel much better for the individual. These mechanisms tried to keep unpleasant memories or thoughts out of the unconscious mind. These mechanisms include repression, projection, displacement, sublimation, denial, regression, rationalization, and reaction formation. Freud's ideas and theories challenged the liberal belief of a rational and unified person who acted in their own interests. He viewed that the three parts of the human psyche, id, ego, and superego, all warred with each other for control of an individual's personality. Freud would be criticized in the future for his views on women and his theories being against those of liberals' beliefs, with many critics attempting to disprove his theories as ridiculous.
Sigmund Freud developed a type of therapy called psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis aims to cure mental illness by investigating the interaction between conscious and unconscious elements in the mind and bringing repressed fears and conflicts into the conscious mind by interpreting dreams. Freud's philosophy was that the human psyche was far from rational but is powerfully influenced by unconscious forces. Another sociologist, Ivan Pavlov, was a Russian who is known for his work on classical conditioning. Pavlovian conditioning was originally discovered on accident while Ivan Pavlov was experimenting with dog salivation when being fed. While doing his research, he realized that dogs salivated when they heard the assistant's footsteps. The assistant would feed the dogs. He also realized that anything which the dogs associated with food would trigger the same response. This brought him to the conclusion that there were some things that didn't need to be taught, such as dogs salivating when they smelt food. Pavlov developed a new way of learning. Pavlov would further his research by adding in a metronome. Every time the metronome produced a noise, the dogs would be given a treat. As expected, the sound of the metronome clicking resulted in an increase of salivation. The experiment became known as a Pavlovian response. When a neutral stimulus, which would be the metronome, becomes a conditioned response. Max Weber was a German sociologist, philosopher, and social economist. Weber challenged positivism, declaring that because human experience is always changing, there are no constant or enduring laws. He also said that the amount of sheer facts involved in policymaking would prevent decisive action from politicians and bureaucrats. Weber believed that capitalism was made possible through a set of religious ideas, Protestant ideas, more specifically Calvinist ideas. His first reason was that Protestantism makes you feel guilty, while in Christianity you are able to confess your transgressions whenever you deem necessary. This was not available to Protestants. The second idea was that Protestant feelings of guilt resulted in obsession of hard work. It was believed that hard work could cleanse your sins. Due to this, there were less celebrations and days of rest. The third idea is that any work could be done in God's name. The fourth idea was that the community comes before the family. Family could lead to selfish and egotistical motives, and you should direct selfless motives to the community. The fifth and final idea was that there are no miracles. This meant that prosperity could only be achieved through hard work and selflessness. And without miracles, people turned to science for answers and solutions. Weber also believed that there were three types of power humanity had gone through. The first was where kings would rely on divinity to justify their power. The second was charismatic authority, where a ruler's authority and rise to power could come from heroism and a good personality. An example of this would be Napoleon. The third and final was where bureaucracy achieved its power through knowledge and knowing how things worked. Some key words for psychology and sociology are Sigmund Freud, psychoanalysis, levels of conscious, Ivan Pavlov, and Max Weber.
Sigmund Freud had contributed greatly to early 20th century psychology, with developments such as psychoanalysis, which helped him crack down to the roots of a patient's mental illness, and his theory on levels of conscience, which helped to provide greater insight into the human psyche. Ivan Pavlov had created his theory of Pavlovian conditioning and stimuli as a development for psychology, while Max Weber had created his theory on types of power in human society for sociology.